Okay, here we go. We're getting set up for our next panel, which is on wearable tech. We have Kathleen Lee, who is the Director of Applied Research Programs and Partnerships for GPAC, here today to lead a panel of esteemed entrepreneurs in this space. So I'm going to go ahead, as always, and moderate questions on Whova during this panel. So if you have anything that you'd like to know, please just go ahead and throw it in there, and I'll pop back on when we have about 10 minutes left. Take it away, Kathleen. Have fun.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn how you can leverage our incredible ecosystem and become a Weartechpreneur. My name is Kathleen Lee. I am the Senior Vice President of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council. I also serve as a Director of Applied Research at the Partnership for Economic Innovation, or PEI for short. PEI is a multifaceted, not-for-profit organization that is working to accelerate economic innovation and activity in our region. We have exciting initiatives like AZ Pipeline that matches employers to job seekers, and the Connective that brings together public and private sector partners to build a smart region through technological innovation. But today we want to focus on PEI's work within the applied research ecosystem, specifically our wearable technology area. We're doing this work with lots of partners like Greater Phoenix Economic Council, Center for Entrepreneurial Innovation, Startup AZ Foundation, MedTech Ventures, and ASU. To give you an idea of the incredible wearable technology ecosystem we have here in our Greater Phoenix market, I want to share a video that describes the awesome ecosystem partnership. So please sit back and enjoy this video.
We're having some technical problems, Kathleen. Sorry. 1 second. 1 second.
Okay, thanks.
Tech Center gives us a really valuable access point where entrepreneurs can not only engage in some of the resources to develop prototypes, but then also access to the knowledge base and the mentors to scale what starts as an idea into a fully functional product to get into market. The focus point for Startup AZ is accelerating the performance of startups across the region. When you look at wearables, anything in hard tech, it becomes that much more of a challenge to get that product into the space. So I think resources like the Weartech Center become essential.
We want to develop this Weartech facility where Arizona can be a leader in wearable systems and wearable robotics, because we have outstanding research being done at Arizona State University. We have outstanding research being done at the Weartech facility, and we've been working in this field for over 15 years.
Applied research is the prerequisite to any type of product development. The faster that you can take applied research, combine it with product development, and then put that straight into user acceptance testing, that is going to be your key to success.
The Barrow Neurological Institute does more brain surgeries than any place in the country. I joined the Weartech Advisory Board for a number of reasons. The obvious one is that we're next door neighbors, and I feel like what we are creating in this area, on this block, is a center for medical invention in this town. So I want to create that hub right here. We view this as the epicenter.
From a Greater Phoenix Economic Council perspective, we focus on innovation just like every other business. Being able to come in and plug into whether it's the Wearable Technology Center, ASU, GCU, or university systems, they're very open and collaborative. people with ingenuity want to come and test their ideas and test their products, and it's just a very unique place, a melting pot of sorts.
The work we're doing here at Weartech and at CEI is help people in the life sciences and biosciences where you can have life-changing impact on people. We're helping very innovative companies bring wonderful products to the market.
Without the Weartech support, we would have technology developed at the university, but we wouldn't be able to do the clinical validation that we're doing here today.
We built a nice ecosystem where we had young, aspiring entrepreneurs with good ideas and people who are investors looking for solutions.
We came in contact with Weartech, and then to have this team that kind of gets created around you, and now to see a product starting to come out of that, again, it was an idea, and now it's kind of real.
Thanks, Kate. As you can see, we have a lot going on in our region. I've been working on this for several years now, and it is so exciting to see the progress we're making. So now let me turn to our great panel. First, we have with us today, Vicky Mayo. Vicky has created an incredible company called Touchpoint. Many of you may be familiar with Vicky and her story, but if you're not, let me just tell you a little bit about her. She started her first business at age 14, graduated from Northern Arizona University, and has an MBA from ASU. She started Touchpoint to help people with challenges they face from anxiety. Vicki has recently also joined the Weartech Center's advisory board, and we're thrilled to have access to her incredible expertise and experience. Welcome, Vicki. First, tell us a little bit about Touchpoint.
Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you too to Phoenix Startup Week. This is always one of my most favorite events every year, and I'm so excited to be able to be here with this panel today. So Touchpoint is actually a wearable device that takes away stress in as few as 30 seconds. It was born out of a decade of research where we took the most successful treatment for PTSD, modified the waveforms, and then created something that we have patented. It's called BLAST, and that stands for bilateral alternating stimulation tactile. So when you put these touch points on, what you feel is gentle haptic vibrations on either side of your body, which gives signals to your brain, which stops your stress response in a matter of seconds.
Sorry, that's awesome. What were some of your kind of early challenges you faced when you were starting up Touchpoint?
Well, starting a business is always fraught with challenges. I think though, with having a wearable, one of the most notable challenges that I faced was really around the development of product. I'm a firm believer in build quickly and get it out to the market for user acceptance testing. And we knew from early prototypes that this concept of the haptic micro vibrations, we knew it worked. But we didn't really know how to build it and how to build it in a form where we could take the research that we had and make it applicable in an actual consumer product. And I will tell you that you learn a lot when you have to build a product, from all the different components that make up a device, to the myriad of engineers and the expertise from plastics to building boards, to final assembly, to sub vendors. So I think that the actual development was probably one of our greatest initial challenges. And as you iterate and the product gets better and you learn more and more, you're always doing more and more product development.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And as you know, our wearable tech ecosystem has become much more robust than it has in the past. What would your advice be to new startups in terms of how they could utilize our ecosystem?
Yes, well, having been around in the community here in Arizona for some time, I am thrilled that our ecosystem is becoming as robust as it is. And I think, number one, getting engaged with the community, attending events like this one, reaching out to the other entrepreneurs or the other, players in the space. I think that's one of the great things you can do. But I also think it is really critical and an amazing resource to be able to connect with forums like the Weartech Center. Personally, I feel like Weartech is a great example where innovators have a unique opportunity to be able to work with university researchers to really enhance products, develop prototypes, and something that is very hard to get access to. You can actually test your products with clinical partners. I think, that is such a huge element. It's such a huge, leg up that entrepreneurs in Arizona have in other places, because using sort of a group like the Weartech allows you to de-risk your research, because you can take your research budget, match it up with resources where the state of Arizona is actually paying a portion of those resources. And that, I always say the greatest asset entrepreneurs have and what they can really leverage is time. So when you are able to leverage resources like Weartech and state funding, this really speeds up the getting products to market, and it saves precious capital that you could spend getting other products out to market. So I think it's amazing that you can pull together these types of cross-collaborative teams and leverage partners like Weartech.
Thank you, Vicki, for those great insights. Now let's switch gears a little bit. One of our incredible ecosystem partners is the Center for Entrepreneurial Innovation, or CEI. And CEI has developed a validation lab, a new program at the biomedical campus in Phoenix. This program helps startups understand the market for their products, and having a deep understanding, as Vicki pointed out, of your target market is really critical to success. Oftentimes, it's the first question that you'll be asked by potential funders, and it's really a key to revenue generation. So today we have Patrick, and he is the CEO of AbleMaker. Patrick is a recent participant in the validation lab and can highlight the value of that program, having gone through that program. So welcome, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So Patrick, tell us a little bit about AbleMaker and what you learned by going through the validation lab program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. I just have to start by echoing what Vicki said. Really, it's impressive to see the lineup of Phoenix Startup Week. Really, thank you for having me. And I just moved here from Vancouver, BC about 1.5 years ago, and it's really nice to see this. So that's impressive. So thank you so much. Yeah, so AbleMaker is a two-sided marketplace in the construction industry vertical. So I'm a little bit different than Weartech, but we're a SaaS business. And really the impetus for us to join the market validation lab was twofold. The first part was just to make sure that our personal biases weren't preventing us from seeing really what the market actually wanted and needed. And then the second part was the customer journey interface. So really start to understand, and if anyone's not familiar with the customer journey interface, it's basically a horizontal representation of your sales funnel, but it also includes kind of resales. And so those two parts were really the impetus for us joining the validation lab. And the learnings from the validation lab were actually amazing. The first learning was that our personal biases were actually okay. We tweaked them a bit just to understand what the market actually wanted, but we proved that they were actually true. And then the second part was the customer journey. And we really used that validation lab to really highlight what parts of the customer journey were important to us. So that was really useful. Those were my two big learnings.
Oh, great. Would you be able to kind of share maybe a couple of examples where, before the validation lab, you understood the customer journey in a particular way, and after that has after the program, whether you were able to kind of shift your strategies or tactics?
Yeah, so really one of the primary points in the validation lab is negative interviews. And I say negative interviews because you basically try to disprove your hypothesis. your value proposition that you currently have, you take that and try to flip it on its head, try to disprove it. And we definitely did that. Our value proposition was, in the beginning, it was feature-based, which is pretty standard in terms of SaaS businesses where I'm coming from. But what we found was the need from the client wasn't based on feature set. It's based on destination. And so that was really the key takeaway for us in the validation lab, and really something that set it apart from what we could do on our own and what we could learn.
Great, thanks for sharing that. In your current startup journey, what is the biggest challenges you're facing today, and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, so biggest challenges on our part is brand messaging. And to start off on brand messaging, you start off with your own. I think Joseph talked about it on Tuesday in his panel. He brought up the idea of making sure that your personal biases align with what the market actually wants. And the only way to do that is to talk to customers, like physical, one-on-one, well, physical or virtual, but the point is one-on-one discussions with your actual customers. And I think that's really how the validation lab really proved its value, is it allowed us to go through that negative interview process, refine, tweak, rinse and repeat, and make sure that we came out with a clearly defined messaging. And your messaging is more important than your product or service. The messaging is really key in how you reach your potential clients.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick, for those important insights. Now let's talk to our third speaker, Josh. Josh has a very interesting wearable technology application that he's developing. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your product and how you're doing as a startup.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. So yeah, my name's Josh. Nice to meet everyone. The product, I'll start with the problem first, because that's usually a good way to kind of give everyone a little bit of context. So one of the biggest problems in our industry, which is this sort of coaching and training industry, is that coaches, when they remove remote, when they go online, whether due to COVID or whether they're trying to scale their business, they lose about $400 to $600 per client per revenue in value, because a lot of what they do as a coach, the personalization, the in-person monitoring, the forewarning, the injury prevention, right? They can't do anymore. They have to basically do it over Zoom, right? And as you can imagine, just looking at someone's form, which, three-dimensional over Zoom, is something that is not necessarily doable, right? So the coaches, they lose a lot of value from that, right? So here's where we come in, right? We create a product that is a full body motion capture system. It uses multiple different wearables, motion capture wearables, right? Simple motion capture sensors embedded into athletic clothing, right? That the coaches then give to their clients, right? And then that as soon as their clients start training, the coaches can then stream full body motion capture insights like form, cadence, power, all the stuff they really wouldn't have been able to get over just a video call is now available to them asynchronously anywhere in the world, right? And then, with far more insights and personalization. So that's kind of like what we do for our startup. Currently, where we're at is that we have about 4 coaches ready for beta testing this summer, with about an estimated 120 athletes. So we have those all lined up. We'll start off small and just test with them. And yeah, our software is underway. Our supply chain is established. So we're just kind of like moving forward. We're currently fundraising right now, just to make sure that not only do we execute a successful pilot, but we can iterate and develop it further at a cadence, right? Because one of the biggest things is we don't want to interrupt our coach's business, right? Because if we have to, if we give them the the MVP and like, then they ask, that's great, Josh, can we improve this part? And then we can't, because we don't have like the resources, that would disrupt their service and we just kind of lose all that momentum. So we're basically ready. We're getting ready. If we can get the fundraising for that, then we're going to move forward, kind of thing.
Great. Sounds like a great product, and you're making a lot of progress. Josh, you participated in MedTech Ventures program, and MedTech Ventures helps startups understand their business challenges and what they're facing and how to overcome those challenges. Can you tell us a little bit about MedTech Ventures and how it has helped you to be more successful as a startup?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, oh man, where do I start? I can't say any. I can't say like all the good. There's so many good things about MTV. So I guess like the first place to start would be, you know, in any kind of like startup, right, and even more so with any kind of hard tech, deep tech, you know, wear tech, right? You know, founders. I was one of the main mistakes, but founders tend to make the mistake of, you know, developing out, you know, the prototypes first, right? They start, you know, working in the lab, working in the prototyping lab, all that jazz, right? You see the engineers, you saw me, right, learning all these different things and just like tinkering with, you know, PCBs, electronics, right, and my co-founder doing the same thing, right? The challenge with that is that that's not the way to go. It's, because you need to start with the problem in the market first, right? MedTech Ventures really gave us the opportunity to do so. We went to MedTech Ventures back when we were still in our senior capstone of college, and MedTech Ventures itself, going through the entire program, they gave you such a comprehensive framework, you know, to think about the market, to think about you know, the opportunities out there, and to think about how to execute, that it gave us some, you know, wiggle room to make some of those mistakes, right? Of like, okay, for example, like we had to ask ourselves, do we really have the problem statement defined? Are we actually, you know, developing that? How are we looking at the market, right? And then that market-driven innovation, right? So I know, for example, like a lot of wear tech is like, oh, we have applied research, then we commercialize it, then we bring it to market, right? You know, I think a lot of founders need to focus on like, hey, before you even do any kind of research, any kind of R&D, right? You really have to figure out, hey, is there a market opportunity, right? Have I talked to enough customers? Have I looked on, I don't know, for me, it's like I browse like tons of fitness forums of independent coaches, just stalking them of like what kind of like problems they have with their clients, right? And this is something I just do like on the regular. My Facebook has been optimized, all of it. I don't see any of my friends' Facebook feeds anymore. It's just all fitness coaches, right? But you know, through that process, right, I know at least the R&D efforts, the applied research is being put to good use, right? Because you can't make that mistake. Hardware is hard, right? And I know that's been said a lot, but the one of the main reasons why it's hard is because if you make a mistake and you drop, you know, $5,000 on like some prototype, you can't like just, you know, take out the code and, you know, rehash it. It's gone. Like it's absolutely gone. All those man hours, all those materials cost, right? Absolutely gone, right? And you can't just like, because it's not a software license where you can just kind of reuse the same program, right? So hence the need, right? The almost like cult-like importance you have to place on like observing customers, interviewing customers, asking customers, the mom testing the customers. That book is amazing, by the way, if you read that book. Mom testing the customers, right? And then just like interviewing the customers, all these different stuff, right? So yeah, that's MedTech Ventures itself has been extremely invaluable in, you know, driving that piece home, right? The comprehensive framework allows that, and not to mention all the different contacts around there to kind of really give you like solid business fundamentals in building any startup, really any startup. Like I can't recommend that program enough for any kind of founder who wants to, you know, get their fundamentals, you know, squared away, basically.
Well, thanks, Josh, and really thanks for stressing the need to really understand your market. So just what is next step for you?
Yeah, next steps is I'm not sure how you guys are doing fundraising for those founders out there who've done it, but I finished up building out my like investor like CRM, if you will. But basically it's my entire process of like, okay, going about, you know, who have I talked to? Are they warm? Are they cold? All this stuff, right? So I just finished building that out. My next steps is basically executing that, right? We recently got a really awesome advisor from Nike. His name's Jordan Rice. He's basically the head of like their smart systems, their entire Nike fuel band. It's crazy stuff, right? And he's been helping us immensely. So he and I have, you know, created a plan together that we're probably going to be executing, which is essentially we're trying to get, you know, the right advisors, the right, you know, angel investors, and the right, you know, VCs early on, not necessarily get funding from the VCs, but, you know, building those relationships, right? The lines, not dots kind of mentality, right? And just start executing that, because that's our most critical thing. Because our software is done, hardware is basically done. Now it's just, you know, enough resources to execute both the pilot as well as the iterations after that.
Okay, that sounds very exciting. Let's bring back all of our speakers and get their impression on what they've heard so far. Thank you all again. From what you've heard today, what do you think is the most important issue facing startups? Let's start with Vicki.
Kathleen, I think that's such a great question. And I think it was very much illustrated, with what Patrick shared, what Josh shared. I think it's product market fit. Understanding what is that product? Is there a place for it? And even if there is, like, for example, everyone is stressed, right? For Touchpoint, everyone has anxiety, but how do you take that product and make it where it's functional and it works for that market? And how do you explain the value proposition as clearly as possible? So I think product market fit, in my opinion, it is the building block of your company. If you nail that, you have a very strong foundation and you're going to be able to grow and ultimately be a very successful company. But if that piece is off, that's where you see a lot of times companies will say, well, we're pivoting. We found something that works, but we're going to present it this way, or we're going to focus on this different market. That is they're figuring out that base foundation level of product market fit. But I think I'm sure Josh and Patrick will agree with me that if you nail that, you're in a good place.
Thanks, Vicki. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, don't forget the fundamentals. Don't start with the end. You can have it in mind, but make sure you do the details. Dig deep to build high. When you're building a skyscraper, you don't just put a slab on grade. You go down below ground and make sure that you understand what it's tied to, and then you can build up. So yeah, completely agree with Vicki.
Thanks, Patrick. I know, Josh, you talked a lot about this, but what are some other insights?
Yeah, so I agree with you, but actually the first thought that came to mind when you asked that question is, I've talked to a lot of founders in the system, in this space. I've talked to founders, across the country as well. And all the stuff you were talking about can be found through these channels, right? A lot of articles are out there that talk about what makes a successful startup, right? And you can learn that if you spent, I don't know, 40 hours on YouTube watching, Y Combinator's how to start a startup series, right? And they have a hardware video too. But I think for me personally, I think what was the most, critical and, perspective that I don't think a lot of founders actually get, right? It's actually really rare, is actually just what an investor is thinking, right? Being in the shoes of an investor, being able to have an investor hat, right, if you will, right? Of like, hey, why is an investor asking me these questions? Right. And then like, why is an investor asking? Because like I had an opportunity to work as a, to keep food at the table. I had an opportunity to work as an early stage venture analyst. So I was looking at a lot of different, pitch decks, deal flow, all this different stuff that, at the same time, I as a founder was building a business, right? So a very unorthodox, opportunity to get that perspective. But through that process, it got to the point where I realized, I understood what investors were looking for, right? I understood why they were asking the questions. And then here's another thing. I also understood, from a founder perspective, which investors I should listen to or not, right? And if they're actually worth their salt as an investor, right? And I think that perspective is something that many founders that I've spoken to, both young and later, right, don't have that. They never had the opportunity of like basically, working as an investor or like putting on an investor hat, right? And knowing why those questions are being asked, right? So for like, it's a very interesting perspective that I think that founders should take more time to cultivate, right? And not necessarily have a negative take on it, because a lot of founders like say, oh, I hate talking to investors. For me, it's like I actually enjoy talking to them. Investors are fun to talk to because I'm like, oh, like you're just looking for this, so like no worries. If we're not a fit, we're not a fit. All good, right? But a lot of founders have that little chip on their shoulder because they don't understand who this person is, right? So founders, hardware or otherwise, figure out how to put on an investor hat, right? And there are books out there that can do it too. Like I remember reading 2 specific books that just completely helped out a lot. But that's the one perspective that I think that founders need to develop that I don't see among founders, is like how to have an investor hat.
Thanks, Josh. You might get some calls from investors after this event. So let's turn our conversation back to our ecosystem conversation. Vicky, from what you know about the Weartech Center, how does having an applied research center like the Weartech Center help startups?
Kathleen, that's a great question, and one that is really close to my heart. I am a big believer that applied research is what bridges the gap from academia to the actual production of products. There are so much research that can happen and so much that does happen. A lot of times you'll read that obscure news article that says, oh, like someone discovered this technology in a lab, 50 years ago, but it never made it to the mainstream public. And I think that's because there's a difference in just research and applied research. And I think it's that applied research. How do I take this and actually put it out to where it's not only just something we know from an academic perspective, but it's actually integrated into people's lives, and it's a product they're using. It becomes part of their life. And I think using applied research helps startups to be able to take good ideas, to take research nuggets, and it's what allows them to translate them into actual actionable things. And we see this, like the concept of, I always love, what Steve Jobs did with Apple and Elon Musk does, like all the, those big ideators. This stuff was out there, these concepts, right? We could fly to outer space, but what they did was they actually made it happen. And that bridging that gap happens with applied research.
Great insight. And maybe at this point, I might want to share with the audience and with our speakers that Weartech Center currently has 5 projects, but we'll also looking for additional projects to onboard at the Weartech Center. And we're going to do this by organizing an ideation event on May 26th to really see if there's some great technologies out there and whether there's great alignment with what the Weartech Center can offer. So at the ideation event, we're going to bring principal investigators at our universities that's developing technologies. And then we'll also bring clinicians, entrepreneurs, as well as industry companies to kind of talk about their needs and what their challenges might be, and whether there could be an alignment between what the principal investigators are working on and the industry needs are. And so if there's anyone out there that is interested in learning more about this event, please go to our website. It's azweartech.org, and that's azweartech.org. So Vicki, I know that you're planning to attend our ideation event. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're expecting?
Well, I'm first of all very excited. I feel like anytime when you get a lot of really smart people together in a room, really good things are bound to happen. So I think the unique thing about the ideation event is that we're bringing together, as you mentioned, right, these investigators, these clinicians, and these entrepreneurs. So each one of them has a very different perspective on how to do things. And when you get 3 different perspectives that can be layered together and aligned, I think you just get a really good holistic idea and view. So I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a good opportunity for us to discuss challenges that are in the industry, and specifically what medical professionals are facing with some of the smartest scientists in the country. Personally, I'm hoping to discuss some of the challenges and needs that Touchpoint is having as we continue to grow and find a multitude of applications for our technology. And how do we, again, narrow that down to make sure we've got the right product market fit. And so I think this event will have some significant implications for us and for our product. And I'm excited to join together with the greater, sphere of individuals that are going to be there. It's going to be a great event.
Thank you, Vicki. I want to bring Patrick into the conversation a little bit here. Patrick, I know you're relatively new to our market. You've already discovered the validation lab offerings, and you're you're going out there and networking. Tell us a little bit about how you took an approach to getting to know our ecosystem, and tell us a little bit about what you found. Oh, Patrick, I think you're mute.
Oh yeah, the space bar didn't work for me there. Sorry. Yeah, I think Vicky kind of touched on it earlier. How if you really want to understand something, you have to be involved. And I've started to get involved in the startup community here, taking a couple action steps to do that. Number one, kind of figuring out what's out there, really researching and understanding what is currently out there. A lot of times you don't have to reinvent the wheel; it's already there. And so I think a lot of times you have to understand the market first, and then dive into what particular piece that you want to dive into. So that's really the approach that I've taken, and really I've seen really good results from even the two things that I've been involved in. One being a networking event that's recurring here in the Valley, and then the other being the CEI validation lab. And those have been just extremely useful, and overall our business case, really developing that, and also getting to know people like Josh in that, and other amazing entrepreneurs in the Valley. So yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. So I think we are going to take some questions from the audience. Kate?
Yep, I'm right here. Yeah. First question is, what was one thing you didn't anticipate while creating your product? Vicky, kick us off.
I was wondering, is this for everyone in the panel to answer, or one of us? One thing that I was not expecting, actually it's interesting when you build a product, you do all the research in the world and you think you know who's going to end up using your product. And, we kind of always knew moms were going to be, a big part of that product market, but it was really interesting. We actually found out we had a huge amount of traction in areas that we are not even on our map, like teachers and schools, and actually using them in the classroom with kids. So I think it's really, I would always say I was very surprised about the people that ended up using Touchpoint for the areas in which it went. But I would always tell every entrepreneur, don't get so limited in what you think needs to happen that you stop looking at other opportunities. Because we could have said, oh, well, this is not intended for schools if we're not going to work with you or explore that opportunity. And I think that would have been a detriment. And so I think that was what was surprising, was the different groups that ended up using our product.
Josh, what about you?
Yeah, so I can't think of anything with the product side because it was all kind of just it was all just kind of like you're gritting it through the process. But I will say that the one thing I didn't expect is how much me and my co-founder have grown in our own respects, and how much we've sort of like developed, right? Both, in like, just maturity in general, right? Obviously, but also just in our skill sets, right? What we had to learn to get some of these things done, and now what our skill sets are today, right? For example, right, I'll give you an example of like a mental shift that happened. When we first started, I didn't feel right calling myself a CEO. I always call myself, oh, I'm a co-founder, right? And I never really felt right. Even my old business cards was like, oh, I don't want CEO. I just want co-founder on there, because I didn't feel right, fitting into that role. But, recently that has, shifted, right? There's a little level of, there's more like self-respect and self-esteem that comes with that. So I think that, over time, I didn't expect how much that would become a thing, right? Especially compared to when I was starting out. Same thing, my co-founder as well. Both individuals we've sort of developed into is something that I didn't expect to happen that like in that regard ever, actually, in my wildest dreams.
Great. Patrick, what about you?
Yeah, I really didn't expect to find the gold that I found in customer interviews. I thought originally that my vernacular was accurate because I grew up in kind of the field that I'm working in. But actually turns out that they speak a completely different language, and it helped us to really develop the brand messaging and brand ID to really help evolve how we approach the customer journey. And so that was really unexpected, an amazing result.
Awesome. Second question, Weartech data is both powerful and personal. Are there any partnerships in place to protect and leverage the data across the board? Anybody hop in if you have an opinion on this.
And Kate, is this just a general question to the greater, privacy laws, or?
I'm not sure. I just read it. That's what it is. So I would interpret it how you're a lawyer, right? So Go ahead, Vicki.
Well, I do think in general, the climate, globally especially, is really about data protection and data safety. And so it is really interesting when you think about, there's been so many documentaries and views on how companies have been taking your data and using it against you, right? So there's definitely been a push to not share your data. But at the same time, when you don't share your data, some of the implications for like greater public health or looking at things from pools of people, that part of it is lost when you don't want to share your data. So, speaking personally, do I want everyone to have my data? No. But speaking as like for the greater population, I think if we did aggregate data safely, then there would be some benefits to it. I think the concern is, who's going to aggregate and hold it safely. I don't think there's any global corporation or company or government or something that's going to hold it. So but I think that is absolutely something that for all of the founders that are doing work in this space around privacy, something you really have to keep tabs of. And I would caution in startups, make sure you research your GDPR laws, your COPPA laws, to make sure that you are really on top of privacy. And really think about what are you going to do with that data once you get it? Because it's not, are you going to get it? It's just a matter of when and what.
That's really good feedback, and also a conundrum with social good there. We have a question for you, Josh. It says, great insights, Josh. How did you make the mentor connections you touched on in the larger ecosystem, tech ecosystem, as advice for others looking to do the same?
That is something that I'm still always struggling with. It. So one of those things is like, as a founder, you're focused on building your team, building the product, even doing the market research, right? And then you get to the point where like, crap, I don't have a big enough network to leverage when it comes to fundraising or otherwise, right? So it's a brute force thing, right? So I'm assuming whoever asked that question is like, oh, you probably assess yourself saying, oh, I don't have anyone relevant per se, right? Two things I would recommend. I would take a second look at that, because people are connected in ways you would not even imagine, right? Even on LinkedIn, right? But by the time you get to your second or third degree connection, you pretty much know a lot of people, right? So you're just one coffee away from meeting the other person that may give you to intro to the right person, right? So take a second look at your connections, right? Look through your LinkedIn, look through whatever social network you have, or just in your personal network, right? And second thing, and here's the bad news, is that it's just a lot of brute force grunt work, right? You have to basically spend a good amount of time looking through those LinkedIn connections, finding the pathways to the intros, right? And finding the right people to talk to, right? I literally, my days now, yesterday, I spent the entire day literally going, because you can, another thing, here's a tip, right? In LinkedIn, you can do, even Google, right? But in LinkedIn, you can use advanced search operands that allow you to search by specific keywords and put in conditional logic. So what I do, to give you an idea, I go to LinkedIn and I go to, some buddy of mine that I'm connected to, some person I know is connected in the space, and I know who will probably give me, intros to people I want to talk to and build my network, right? I search in angel, capital OR, like or, right? Or investor or VC, right? Those three words I search in there, and it just pops up all the people who have these words somewhere in there, right? And I spend the next, 12 hours, literally, not even kidding, 12 hours just going through each of those pages of people, reading their descriptions and saying, okay, is this a person I could talk to? Is it not? What would be the correct intro path? Is it not, right? And I put them, into my system and then kind of go forward. And I go through that over and over again, right? And then now I have like at least lead gen of like, okay, who to talk to, right? If you want to see this in a good analogy, this is investor acquisition or developing your network is just extremely high touch point sales, right? You have to generate sales, talk to the right people, and then when you talk to the right people, then you have to like, see if we're a fit, right? And that process takes hours and hours and hours, right? So it's both. I would relook at your network, because you might miss some things. The second thing I would recommend blocking off like several hours, in a week consistently just to work at this, because it is not something that you can just kind of get, right? A strong network isn't built in like a day, right? It's built through, weeks and weeks, months and months of consistent effort of building relationships, finding the right fit, talking to people, right? And if you're an introvert like me, it's very hard. It's just exhausting. But otherwise, it's fine. You just have to do it, And honestly, it does turn out to be really, really, beneficial and later on.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
We have a minute each to answer our last question, which is probably, it's going to be hard to condense in 1 minute. How did COVID impact your business? And specifically supply chain? Let's see. Patrick, want to start us off on that one?
Yeah, I can go first because it's an easy answer for me. We haven't publicly launched yet, so we're an alpha working group. So no effect yet for me, but I think the construction industry overall is really really piping right now because of COVID and renovation. So I think it will, but it hasn't yet.
Josh, what about you?
Yeah, so COVID actually improved our market forces. All our customers actually shifted towards their behaviors of looking for online solutions versus the opposite, where they were exclusively training in person. COVID didn't necessarily affect our supply chain. It did increase the lead times of some of our inventory. But given the state that we're at, that wasn't the primary concern. We weren't too worried about that. So, but it did introduce more remote work culture into our mix as well.
And Vicki?
COVID was an interesting time. People looked more and more at mental health and obviously had a lot more stress and anxiety. So we grew very significantly over the COVID time and continue to grow. But as far as supply chain goes, it has been challenging. Not just, with we had issues with tariffs, and then we had issues with COVID, and then we had issues with the Suez Canal. So it's been quite the perfect storm with supply chain. We've definitely seen longer lead times, shortages in the marketplaces, and manufacturers end of life in products that we were not expecting to have them end of life. So it's been a lot. So if you are in that components world, buy your inventory and stockpile it.
Kathleen, any parting comments as we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to Phoenix Startup Week, Kate, to all of our speakers here. Thank you for a fascinating discussion and sharing your experiences and insights. So I'm very excited about our ecosystem and how it's becoming so robust and really helping our startups to go to scale. So thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kathleen, and our panelists. Thank you for all your work. Be well, everyone.